From the headquarters of Tell Us Your English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. All eyes are on the Western alliance of military powers. The U.S. President Donald Trump and other leaders of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization as they traded barbs and insults as they began the two-day summit in Brussels. Hours after arriving, President Trump launched into an unprecedented attack on member countries. He said many of them were delinquents for not spending at least 2% of their GDP on defense as they had promised. Reports say Trump has now told NATO members they should increase their contribution to 4%. He also accused Germany of being captive to Russia because it takes so much of its energy from the Nord Stream gas pipeline from Russia.
But Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO. And I don't think it should have happened.
In an unusually candid reply, the NATO Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, told Trump that NATO was good for the United States because it helps protect U.S. power in the Middle East and Africa, as well as against Russia. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel also responded.
You know, NATO is an alliance of 29 nations, and there are sometimes differences and different views and also some disagreements. And the gas pipeline from Russia to Germany is one issue where allies disagree. But the strength of NATO is that despite these differences, we have always been able to unite around our core task to protect and defend each other, because we understand that we are stronger together than apart. I think that two world wars and the Cold War taught us that we are stronger together than apart.
I would like to take this opportunity in light of recent events that I have myself witnessed that parts of Germany was under Russian control. And I'm very happy that today we are unified in freedom as the Federal Republic of Germany. And that's why we can say that we make our own politics and make our own decisions. That's very good, especially for the people in the new federal states.
Now joining us live from London is Tell Us Your's political analyst, Tariq Ali. Tariq, thank you so much for joining us. We've seen these extraordinary exchanges at the start of the NATO summit. What exactly is going on?
Well, what is going on is fairly straightforward. The United States has for many years, including well before Trump became president, been active behind the scenes, suggesting that the European countries pay more to NATO, participate in more NATO actions, and basically take their responsibilities. They've been saying this politely, without too much debating in public. What Trump has done is brought this discussion straight out into the open, as is his style as president, and said publicly what is being said behind the scenes, and he has done it in his characteristic fashion by insulting countries, by insulting political leaders who are meant to be, and in fact are, US allies. Without the support of the EU countries, Trump would have had problems in many parts of the world, as the US would have, in running their empire. The EU is an important part of the cleaning up operations of the American empire and aiding what they do in Africa, as some of them have been pointing out. So why insult Germany? I think he wants more money from the Germans. I think the American position has been for some time that the Germans are the largest power in Europe and should play more of a role in military operations. And so he's decided to do this public, but of course without understanding what impact it will have inside Germany itself. And one more thing.
Really quickly. Hi, Tariq, really quickly. I have to ask, why do you think, we just said that these discussions have become public, but why have they become public? Is Trump playing more to his domestic audience, or does this have to do with the fact that he's meeting with Vladimir Putin next week?
I think both those things are involved, but things like this have happened before. I think Trump is basically saying to the military-industrial establishment at home and his own supporters, I'm going to be tough, I'm going to teach the Germans a lesson. It is largely aimed at his domestic audience, I think, in order to make sure the midterms go well and to show the world that he is not a Putin friend, a Putin stooge himself.
And now there are protests now in Brussels against NATO. Can we expect more protests in Britain, where Trump is going to be there on Friday? What can we expect? What are the demonstrators in London expecting?
Well, I think there will be tens of thousands of people out on the streets in London demonstrating against America's wars, against Trump's escalation of these wars in some cases, and of course the NATO alliance. I mean, lots of people are asking, what is this alliance for? It is not a defensive alliance, it is an offensive alliance which is used to help the United States maintain its empire. And why should this go on for so long? And after Trump's insults, many people in Germany and elsewhere, I mean citizens, not necessarily the elite, will be asking the same questions. So I think the reception Trump is going to get in Scotland, where he's going to go to play golf, will be huge. There was big anger in Scotland at many of the things he said, and many Scottish newspapers are publicly calling for the people to turn out against Trump.
Tariq Ali, I'm wondering, are we going to be seeing you at the protest on Friday against President Trump when he gets to London?
I hope so, unless something else happens. I will certainly be there, as well. More important than me, there will be tens and tens of thousands of young people.
Well, hopefully we can talk to you again and talk to you about how those protests work. Thank you so much for chatting with us. We've been speaking to Talisker political ally, Tariq Ali, who was talking to us from London. Now, other news now. In an abrupt U-turn, the Haitian communication minister says he will not be resigning. Gaila Delva announced his resignation on Twitter on Tuesday amidst protests in the capital, Port-au-Prince. At the time, President Jovenel Moïse had blamed his communication team for not effectively handling the new gasoline price rollout, which sparked the protests in the first place. However, hours after, Delva said the president asked him to reconsider his decision, and he has. Haitian President Jovenel Moïse met on Tuesday with representatives of the influential metropolitan private sector. Moïse said on Twitter the meeting was to discuss the actions to restore stability and economic recovery. On Monday, various lawmakers and religious and economic leaders urged Moïse to change course in the government, namely calling on Prime Minister Jacques-Guy Lafontaine to resign. Our correspondent Desi Toussaint has more from Haiti.
The situation in the Haitian capital, Port-au-Prince, is returning to normal after the protests over the weekend over the proposed fuel price increase and following 2 days of a general strike. That strike was called by trade unions and opposition groups, and it paralyzed transport. You can now see people going about their business. There's transport circulating, supermarkets, and many shops have reopened, although they are on alert for any possible looting. We are still waiting for news of possible resignations in the government. President Jovenel Moïse met Haiti's leading authorities to discuss solutions to the intense protests, which left at least 3 people killed. Meanwhile, the opposition has called for a peaceful protest this Wednesday. We'll keep you updated.
We thank Daisy for that report. Now, the National Police Chief, Michelangelo Gideon, told local media if the police had been informed of the date of the price increase, they would have been on standby for any possible unrest. Instead, they too were caught off guard. Only 1/3 of their workforce was present at the time the protest started. Gideon said he even advised the government to raise awareness of the importance of increasing fuel prices to avoid such an incident. Well, we're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. The crisis in Nicaragua continues. Recent events in Diaramba, where the priests of the San Sebastian Basilica have been attacked for harboring alleged opposition fighters, which have some believing the Catholic Church is biased towards the opposition.
Ongoing violence in the streets continue, and the Catholic Church, in its role as the mediator of national dialogue called for by President Daniel Ortega, is starting to receive heavy criticism from the population, as now the crisis goes on into a fourth month.
The Church's role is to stand by the people. They have to honor the Word of God and not support violent acts.
Analyst believes these reactions are part of the division Nicaragua is going through. People believe the Church is siding with the opposition.
The Church must be neutral. No matter your beliefs or political affiliation, we all believe in the Church, in our priests. But we want our priests to stand with us, to let everyone have their say. During the current political uprising in our country, we have seen some priests collaborate with violent groups and have provided temples to foster violent and illegal acts.
And some of the members of the Church defend the institution's role, denying any bias.
We have to maintain serenity. We cannot be manipulated by interested parties that want to foster confrontations. The world wants peace and it wants love.
For now, the Episcopal Conference of Nicaragua, acting as mediator and witness to the national dialogue, announced that they will restart the talks by the end of this week.
During a meeting in El Salvador celebrating the 39th anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution, the FMLN expressed their solidarity with the Nicaraguan people who are facing a wave of violence led by opposition groups. The FMLN sent their support to the Sandinista people and to the government of Nicaragua, saying that they represent a model for Latin America. They also called for a peaceful solution without any foreign interference and sent words of encouragement to Nicaraguan families and the people who have lost their loved ones. Finally, they expressed their support to President Daniel Ortega in his struggle for peace and justice.
We consider it pathetic that after a big effort by the Nicaraguan government of improving democracy, life conditions, economy, sustainability for Nicaraguans, suddenly they face violent acts that damage the everyday lives of the people.
As youth, we support Nicaragua and ask for peace. We support the fight of our brothers in the Sandinista front. They must know the right wing will not win, and the Sandinista revolution will go on. And it must be the youth at the forefront of this fight for peace.
Staying in El Salvador, protests continue to gain momentum against the possible privatization of water. Citizens and social movements are up in arms to demand their basic human rights to water. Public and private sector employees joined forces with the Trade Union Confederation of Salvadorian Workers and marched to the Legislative Assembly. Their demand was clear and simple, and it was to say no to privatization. IMF officials spent the last 2 weeks in Ecuador trying to evaluate the country's economic situation. The IMF team visited Quito, Guayaquil, and Cuenca, meeting with the private sector and economists. They said they found notable improvements in the government's fiscal policy, but some adjustments still need to be made, especially as it relates to labor.
They provide counseling in how to renegotiate the external debt and how to be financed. They are also going to provide resources to the government to cover the immense budgetary deficit, especially in national security areas.
The ambassador of Ecuador in Spain, Cristobal Roldan, said on Tuesday that if former President Rafael Correa tries to seek asylum in Spain, he would process an extradition request at the order of the Ecuadorian government. Roldan also said that Correa's rights will be respected if he returns to Ecuador to face accusations linking him to the alleged kidnapping of the former National Assembly member, Fernando Bolder, in 2012. Correa has rejected all accusations and has denounced this as an act of political persecution. In an exclusive interview with Telesur, Correa shared his views on the current administration 1 year after Lenin Moreno took office.
The report issued by the International Monetary Fund rejects all of Lenin Moreno's lies. Despite the drop in oil prices, despite losing trials in international courts, despite the devastating earthquake, we managed to recover our economy without increasing poverty or inequality in record time.
And in another act of political persecution, the efforts to release the former Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, from prison continue, as Lula's lawyer explains.
We have presented to the courts a request for the freedom of former President Lula. This month the court will be in recess, but in August it will be analyzed. The sentence that led to his imprisonment was incompatible with the Brazilian legislation and also with international treaties, since it was clearly marred with irregularities. The fact is that Lula did not commit any crime and can be condemned and sent to jail.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs for Brazil, Aloysio Nunes Ferreira Filho, is expected to visit Guyana on Thursday. During the visit, he will pay a courtesy call on President David Granger. Minister Filho will also meet with Vice President and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Carl Greenidge, to discuss mutual areas of interest relating to the bilateral agenda. This year also marks the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries. In Argentina, public workers plan more protests as the government signed a decree to make adjustments on the public sector. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more.
President Mauricio Macri signed a decree to freeze public sector wages and to reduce the number of public sector workers in alignment with demands made by the International Monetary Fund. This means an adjustment of $20,000 million that goes against, once more, the citizens. The measure will affect 6,000 public workers that won't be able to renew their job contract for next year. Unions and workers are obviously worried and on alert to plan mobilizations and actions against this measure. They say sectors like farmers and financial speculation are benefiting, while they are deprived by the austerity measures.
Foreign Minister of the Central American North Triangle and Mexico met in Guatemala with the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security to discuss the way forward for the quick reunification of children separated from their parents at the southern U.S. border.
Latin American leaders demanded children be reunited with their parents at the southern U.S. border. Hundreds of children remain alone in detention centers in conditions that infringe on their integrity and their rights.
Keeping children apart from their parents is a cruel and inhumane act, and all the people that are here agree on it. First of all, we don't want this to happen again, and secondly, we demand actions that make possible a prompt reunification of detached children with their parents.
The Washington representative assured that they will work on a plan in cooperation with countries in the region to speed up the reunification process. while she kept reaffirming that the entry to her country should be only in accordance with the U.S. laws.
We'll continue to encourage all those who undertake such a journey. Please do so legally. Please do so and ask for asylum in the first safe country that you reach. There is no need to break U.S. law to seek the shelter that you need. If you find yourself approaching the U.S. border, please go to a port of entry where we can properly and with compassion and professionalism take care of your asylum claim.
However, for migration rights organizations, this speech is one thing, but the practice is another, since they do not believe that Donald Trump's administration will relent on its immigration policy.
We don't believe that's going to be eased. We rather believe that this was a direct message from the US government. It was very clear, but also very dramatic and very blunt as well. In order to tell to immigrants not to come, even though the US needs and has always needed migrants.
At the moment, the Department of Homeland Security will have a special office that will offer information and deliver follow-up or tracking reports to family reunification cases. But immigrants will continue to be captured and deported without a consensual immigration reform.
Time now for another short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. U.S. officials have revealed a list of Chinese goods they will be targeting with further tariffs, raising fears of an escalating trade war. The tariffs aren't expected to go into effect immediately, but will be subjected to a 2-month review process. The $234 billion figure they're looking at is more than the total value of U.S. exports to China. Our correspondent in Beijing, Isira Diaz, has more on this escalating trade war.
This new decision by the United States in the trade war with China is having a big impact in the media here. That's because the US has decided to impose extra tariffs of 10% on another set of Chinese products worth over $200 billion US. These new tariffs would come into effect from September. China called the decision completely unacceptable. The United States announced these new tariffs after China responded in kind to the earlier US tariffs of 25% on $34 billion worth of Chinese exports, which came into effect last Friday. China has accused the United States of wanting to destroy bilateral trade and repeated that it will take these unilateral measures by the US to the World Trade Organization. The Chinese Ministry of Trade has said it will take its own measures to protect China's interests. It says the measures hurt not only China but also the United States and the whole world economy. The new Chinese tariffs will target US exports like sorghum, soya, cars, pork products, pistachios and whiskey. Since the trade war really began last Friday, China has been urging its companies to reduce their imports from the United States and to try to import those products from other countries. Beijing is also seeking alliances with other countries that defend free trade. For example, the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang was in Germany to meet the Chancellor Angela Merkel. Both spoke out against protectionism and signed a trade deal worth $23 billion, which included 22 cooperation agreements.
We thank Sarah for that report. Officials have released the first video of the young football team in a hospital in Chiang Rai, Thailand, one day after their dramatic rescue. In the video, the boys are seen chatting with nurses, some are waving and showing victory signs to the camera. Their parents are also seen watching them from a window trying to cheer them up. The hospital has said all of them are strong in mind and heart, but still, they will be monitored for 7 days before being sent home. They also said the boys need to eat well and rest for another 30 days. And lastly, a Russian World Cup update as the second semi-final takes place later today. Croatia and England go head-to-head to decide who will face France for the 2018 FIFA World Cup trophy. Well, we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talis Your English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you so much for watching.